How y'all doing? My name is Yahweh Yovagon. I'm going to be showing y'all how to do a pre-trip inspection on your truck or tractor, whichever you prefer to call it. You always want to make sure to start on the driver's side. You always want to make sure that you got your lights. You can see in here, we're missing a light over here. Always want to make sure that your door is operational. That seems to be good to go. You also want to make sure that the seals are always good. They're not getting loose. They're not cracked or nothing, dry rotting, anything like that. Got a little bit of looseness over here. Doesn't look too pretty tight, but we can get that fixed. Always want to make sure that the latch for when you're inside moves. I'll get in there later and make sure that it works. Always want to make sure that your mirrors are tight and secure. Always want to make sure that you got your bolts in place. Everything is present and tight. You want to also make sure that it doesn't move too much. It's not too loose and you got too much play. You want to make sure that your steps have all the right bolts and all the right things in there. Make sure that it's tight enough. Bring this down. You want to make sure that your batteries are in there and that they're all good. They're not too rusty. And that the battery hold down also has all its nuts and bolts in there as well. Over here you've got your discharge for your air tanks. I'm pulling on it right now. I'm not getting anything because the system's not filled up with any air. You want to make sure that your cap for your diesel tank is on there and it's tight. You also want to check and make sure that there's no cracks or anything on there like that. Again, make sure that your steps are tight. You also want to make sure that your tires have the right depth on it. For the steer tires or the drive tires, you want to make sure that you have a minimum of 430 seconds. Anything below that is not going to pass the DOT inspection. You got to get that changed. You also want to make sure that you got your lug nuts on here, that they're not loose. If you've got rust coming from under the lug nuts, that might mean it's loose. You might need to get all that replaced. Want to make sure all this stuff is good. Want to make sure this stuff is gone there and tight. You want to make sure that your electrical connections are good and that there's no dirt in there of any kind. That one looks pretty good. You also want to make sure that your air hoses are good as well. As you can see here, not only is the seal on this getting pretty thin, but it's also getting chipped. You need to get that replaced. I want to check the other one too. This one is also thin and it's pretty chipped on the side. You want to get that replaced. You want to make sure that everything is tight. You want to make sure that these steps work. You also want to make sure that your shocks for the cab is good. You also want to make sure that the airbags for your cab is also good, but as I said, they're pretty empty because there's no air in the system. As I said before, you want to check your air tanks, make sure everything is good, make sure they're all tight. Make sure all the hoses are tight and nothing's loose. You want to also check your mud flaps. This thing's pretty tight, but we've also got rips over here. We need to get that replaced immediately. Get all these bolts in there tight and good. Want to make sure that the tread on your tires are good. This one looks like it's okay, but this one definitely needs to get replaced. I don't even think I could fit a coin in there and show you how bad it is, but it is pretty bad. It needs to get replaced immediately. For your fifth wheel, you want to make sure that the handle works. You want to make sure that it's all greased up. As of right now, it's not too greased. We should probably get some more grease on that, but it's okay because it's getting worked on right now. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. Again, check your tread depth. These ones look pretty new. They're okay. You want to check the mud flaps over here. The airbags are depleted. That's why it's dragging on the ground. And once we get the air back in there, it's going to raise it up. It's going to take this off the ground. You want to make sure that all your lights work. It's not going to work, obviously. It's been disconnected from the harness. Again, this truck is getting worked on. While you're back here, you want to make sure that all your other electrical components are good. Nothing's broken, nothing's loose, nothing's cracking in between and dry rotting or any of that. You want to make sure your differential is good. Make sure it's not too rusty. Make sure it's not rusting through. Again, check all your connections. This one's pretty loose. We need to get this tightened up. Again, the tires, they look pretty good. For the tread depth, we'll be okay with those. Make sure that all of the bolts on your shocks and on all the airbags and all that stuff is pretty good. Make sure that all of the bolts on your frame especially are not missing, they're present and tight. Make sure everything is good on the fifth wheel. Make sure that you've got your connection. Again, check your shocks, airbags, bolts, check all that stuff. Unlike the other side, these tires over here, they look good. They're good to go. Mud flaps are all good. While you're here, you want to check on the exhaust. Make sure that you've got nothing. You got no cracks. Make sure all your U bolts, they're all tight and on there. They're going to keep the exhaust from falling over or anything like that. You also want to make sure up here where the clamp is that you don't have any like black soot or anything, because that can mean you have an exhaust leak, and that's not good. Again, check your shocks and all that stuff. Make sure that the cap is on there, it's nice and tight. Make sure that your steps work. All the bolts are there and present, and they're tight. Make sure that these work, they got all of the stuff in there. You also want to make sure that you got your bolts over here as well, to make sure that there's nothing missing. Always check your lights. Again, on this side we're missing the turning light. We're gonna have to get that replaced. Make sure that your mirrors are sturdy, that they're not going anywhere. They're not gonna fall anywhere. And all the bolts over here to keep it in place are steady and tight. Also check your door again. Check your seals. Make sure nothing is cracking or dry rotting. Make sure that it's not loose either. Make sure that you've got all your bolts to keep the door in place. Again, make sure that you've got all your lug nuts in place and that they're not loose or anything. Make sure that the tread depth on your steer tires are good. You want to come back and check your service brake chambers. Make sure that is okay. Make sure everything here is okay, along with the steering linkage and the pitman arm. Also check your spring leaf. Make sure it's not too rusty and that it's not too loose and that you can't move it. Might as well check the frame over here as well. Make sure that you don't have any leaks or anything like that. The governor looks good, AC unit looks good. This piece right here is broken. We're gonna have to get that replaced so that it can hold in the wires. Make sure they're not going anywhere. Also check on your headlights. Make sure that you've got all your wires and harnesses here. Make sure that nothing is cracking or dry rotting, that everything's here and that it's good and tight. You want to make sure that your hood mirrors especially stay and don't go anywhere. Make sure that they have all their nuts and bolts in there. Check your headlights, especially make sure that there's no cracks in there. Make sure that there's nothing that can fog up and affect the performance of the headlights. Same thing for this side. You want to make sure that it's all sturdy and tight. We've got our bolt in there to keep it there. Make sure that it's not moving too much, it's not got too much play. Again, check your headlights. Just like the other side, we've got them both missing, but again, this truck is getting worked on. We've got our turning signal light. Come over here, you want to make sure that you got all your fluids. Make sure everything's good to go. Make sure everything is tight. As you can see, we're at the minimum, but it'll be okay once we turn the car back on. The truck, I meant. Make sure everything is good and tight. Again, check your service brake chambers, check all your wires, make sure nothing is broken or cracking. Want to go ahead and check on your wipers, make sure that they're all good, make sure that it's not broken or anything or it's loose. You also want to check on the windshield, make sure that there's no cracks in there or anything. Again, on this side, check to see if you got your wipers. Make sure that they're not broken or cracked or any of that. Make sure that they're operational. We don't have the key, so we can't check that right now. Make sure that you got your lights above the cab and make sure that they work. Again, we don't have the key, so we can't test them out. Whenever you're in here, you want to make sure that your windows work, but these are electrical. Can't test them right now. I'm gonna test to see if the door opens from the inside. As you can see, it works. The locking mechanism works as well. All the bolts to keep the door frame in place, they're present and tight. Again, check all your seals, even on the inside of the cab. Make sure that there's nothing loose. Make sure that everything's good to go. Make sure that your bolts to keep the floor compartment in place are tight. As you can see, these need to get retightened or replaced. When you get in there, you turn your truck on. You want to make sure that all your gauges are full. Make sure that everything's operational. Make sure that your parking brake and your trailer brake work and all that good stuff. Make sure that if you have a manual, that your truck is in neutral before you turn it on. Make sure that your seat is steady. This one kind of shifts a little, but we can get that fixed. And basically, that's how you do a pre-trip inspection. I'm sure I didn't do it the right way, but we can always do better. Thank you for watching.